Welcome to Maddox AI Plus Post Sales Summit. You're currently watching Plan and Optimize Digital Campaigns Driven by Data. I'm excited to introduce our speaker. And as I introduce them, I'm going to have them answer our icebreaker question. Chrissy, this is for you. What's one AI use case you wish existed but haven't seen yet?
Yeah, hey everybody. Um, this one's tough. I was thinking about like what are some things I could use in my real life, like outside of work. And I think honestly, like this may break some privacy concerns, but I feel like I would love an AI that could just like remind me of people's names. So when I first meet somebody, it's like, I don't know, I just like draw a blank, I black out, I don't remember their name. Like 5 minutes later, it could just like, bloop, this person's name is Rachel. I'd be
Right.
like, nice. So yeah, that's what I would love to see.
Definitely a good example. All right, Chrissy, I'll hand it over to you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Let me just share my screen here. Okay. Can you see that okay?
Yes, I can.
Great. All right, everybody. Well, thank you, Matic, for hosting this great summit. I'm really excited to this for this. I'm honestly just as excited to host as I am to watch some of the other sessions. For this session, I'm going to show you how to use something you probably already have access to, an LLM, just keeping it simple. And we're going to analyze data. We're going to generate visuals and just going to help you make data-driven decisions and storytell with your data. More specifically, the example I'm going to walk through is analyzing behavior for new users and then using that data to actually create a digital onboarding program. Okay. But I should probably introduce myself. So my name's Chrissy Quinones. I'm a digital customer success program manager at FullStory. I know that's a mouthful of a title, but essentially I own one-to-many customer success programs. And I use data almost every day to help me make decisions, validate a signal for a program, and report out on the impact, which is the most important part. But FullStory is a behavioral data company, if you're not familiar with it. And essentially, we help our customers aggregate data on their customers so that they can create better digital experiences. So, for example, one of our customers is Duolingo. So, imagine you're a user of Duolingo and you're experiencing a bug. They're able to actually like open up and watch your experiencing that bug. And then that makes it makes it a lot easier for them to fix what's going on. So, I love data, which is why I work at a data company. But I've spent many hours, probably too many hours, learning like VLOOKUPs and pivot tables in Google Sheets, only to realize like, oh, wow, I could use AI to do this. So I want to share what I've learned. I also am part of a AI group at my work where we share ideas. And I love joining sessions like this and learning from other peers. But I'm kind of curious to hear from you all. Like lately, I've kind of felt like this meme, this very popular meme where it just feels like very overwhelming by all of the AI that's out there. I think even like in the last month since I was asked to do this session, it feels like so much has changed. So I'm just kind of curious, like, throw an emoji up or chat, like, do you feel like this too? And like, you're not alone. But I just want to say, like, the reason why we probably feel this way is because we know too much. We're at like the top 10% or top 1% or of, AI users right now. I think especially for folks like in software, right, SaaS, you're probably feeling this because it's just being like so commonly used across the board. But I think like in due time, these LLMs will make it easier and easier and easier to access. I know there's like Cursor and Claude and Cowork and all of these things that are sort of like on the cutting edge. But I just want to reassure you, like, we're going to be okay. And my goal for today is to help you stop feeling like this person. And we're just going to keep it simple and just like, show you how to use a simple LLM to analyze data. There's really like nothing fancy. But first, I want to like walk through a couple of concepts before we dive in. And this is kind of like what I've learned over the past couple of years. like LLMs really don't work well if you're using it like a Google search engine. Um, Now I know like whenever you Google something nowadays, it comes up with an AI summary, and that's one thing. But the LLM, if you're just like typing something in and hoping to get a clear answer, you're probably not going to be. So the best thing you can do is really treat it like a thought partner, right? Like a super smart colleague that's never going to judge you. And you can even ask the LLM to help you figure out the right question or the right prompt that you should be asking to help make it better. And honestly, I've even used an LLM to say, hey, can you like train me on how to use you? Recently got access to Claude and I just asked Claude, like, show me around basically. And so I wanted to walk through this concept kind of that I've been discussing called it's the prompt loop that I'm calling it, which is first you dive in and you just have like a rough idea and you provide that to the LLM, and then and then you ask like, hey, before you respond to this or before you analyze this data, for example, why don't you ask me up to 5 questions that would be helpful to give me a more accurate, useful, and specific output? And don't analyze it, like just ask. And I'll show you what that actually looks like. But then you're just going to answer its questions. And then you're going to say, hey, AI, now can you rewrite my original prompt? And then you can actually copy and paste that into a new chat and probably receive a better output. I also kind of want to talk about like my own personal evolution and what I'm seeing in this space. But the first time I used an LLM, I think I was just sort of like providing this wall of text, right? Because we were told, hey, like you really need to tell the AI who you are, what you want. Um, and like back then it would kind of get more confused if you gave it like too much context, right? So now we kind of moved into this like conversational iteration, which is that prompt looping I was talking about. You could really like keep it casual, have a more back and forth conversation, and the AI is getting like less and less confused. And like right now, and sort of where we're headed is to this like context-driven agentic workflow, which we're going to touch on a little bit, but not get too into it. This is something I've really been diving into like the last couple of months, but essentially like you can create agents and you can connect them to MCPs. If you haven't heard of that, you can Maven.com is a great resource that I've gone to learn about all these things. But essentially it's a way to connect to, the third-party tools that you use. And then you're giving more context to the LLM so that it knows exactly what you want. You can also do things like connect it to your Google Drive, upload a markdown file. So you could say, hey, like, here's my company jargon, here's my voice and tone, here are my brand guidelines. And by doing that, and by giving it this like permanent context, then you can really start to use that conversational iteration and just ask it a simple question because it already has that like, right, that old like wall of text. It's storing that for you. And so it's able to kind of refer to that while it's responding. Okay. So sorry, one sec. Just lost my place. But this is a question we're going to answer today, which is I kind of mentioned this in the beginning, but this is the question we essentially want to ask the AI, which is among new users, which early feature behaviors are correlated with retention and what should we prioritize in digital onboarding? So without pulling up like the whole CSV, I'm just going to show you a sample of what it looks like. And I will talk to you about like how I got this. But first, I just want to help you make sense of what this is so that when we're talking to the LLM, it makes sense to you. But um, so this is a breakdown of each user and right their experience as they experience full story. This probably isn't a great sample that I pulled, but the numbers here are essentially like this action and the number of times they performed that action when they logged in for that session. Okay, so the session date is the date that they logged in. The first session is the first time that they've ever logged in, and the persona is their job function essentially. So how did I get this data? Well, I benefit from working at FullStory. I have access to FullStory, but if you have an analytics tool, then you can define some of these events. And then that data is getting sent to BigQuery, which is our data warehouse. And then from there, I use a BI tool. For us, we use Looker, and essentially am able to break that down by user, persona, first login, right? So I'm telling it like I want to see this, and then I just downloaded it. I did anonymize it for today's demo, so you're not going to see any PII or anything like that. Um, but that's kind of if you're curious about like your, new users and their activity, that would be kind of the flow I would follow to get that. And you can reach out to your data team and say, "Hey, I saw this session. How do I do this?" And they should be able to help you get that set up. Um, but what do you need to follow along today? You don't need to do that. You really could just, you know, create like your own CSV from anything really, because the concepts are going to be the same. But you need access to an LLM, which hopefully you have like something like ChatGPT, Gemini, etc. And if you are going to pull down a CSV file from Salesforce or wherever you're getting it from, I would just make sure your security team is okay with you using, customer data. And if you're not sure, you can use dummy data. So I did find this website. This Maven is where I go to like learn about AI and stay on top of it. But if you go to this site, this is where you can get, free dummy data. Okay. And this is, if you can't see it, it's mavenanalytics.io. All right. So let's dive in. Okay. Let me start a new chat here. So I'm going to use Gemini for my LLM today. And just to kind of like speed things up and stay on time, I'm going to copy and paste a prompt here. So I showed you that CSV. The first thing I'm going to do is actually just drag and drop it into my chat window. All right, and then here's what I'm going to say. Zoom in so you guys can see this. Okay, so you're operating as a world-class data analyst, right? We still want to say what it should operate as. And then here's a CSV of activity for new users that first logged into FullStory in February of 2026. So it's important to set the tone for like when these new users logged in. And then among these new users, which early feature behaviors, again, we're defining what we mean by that first 14 days, are most associated with still being active beyond day 30. Same thing, we're defining what retention means to us. Um, and what should we prioritize in a digital onboarding campaign? And when you analyze, this is important, I want you to use Python and charts and graphs to help visualize. This is going to make sure that it's using that Python and it's actually going to show you some visualizations. And then again, another important part, but this is before you do a real analysis, I want you to ask me up to 5 questions that would help you give me a more accurate, useful, and specific output yet. Don't analyze yet, just ask. And I'm also in the pro mode for this, which is hopefully going to give me better responses. So I've ran this like a few times prepping for this demo, and each time it's given me different questions. And so that's like the interesting thing about AI is that you should always double check your work, right? And I would recommend like running it through a few times to see what it comes up with. But a majority of the time, the questions have been relatively the same. So we're just going to respond to these one by one. And I'm just going to type in number one, right? And just respond to these in order. So the first question is, how do we define active beyond day 30? So does this mean simply logging into the platform at least once after 30 days? Let's say yes, logging in at least once beyond 30 days. Then I'm going to hit Shift Enter on my keyboard and just respond to the next one. Are there specific user personas we should prioritize? No, but let's break down by each persona. So like your questions, I mean, your answers may vary. It's just really up to you and what you want your campaign to look like. What is the medium and timeline? So let's just say we're designing an email sequence over the course of 14 days. Okay. Is there an existing hypothesis on your team? Let's just say we don't know. And then how should we treat passive versus active engagement? Some metrics like dashboard views and passive, just say treat it all the same. Okay, then we're just gonna hit enter on our keyboard and let it cook and see what happens. And again, like I said, I've run this a few times. Um, Sometimes it doesn't even come up with the visuals, so you just want to, make sure it's doing what you've asked. And if not, you can just use that conversational iteration to just say, hey, like I don't see visuals. Can you do this? Or hey, I want to dig into, product manager, right? Like let's see what that persona looks like. So you can kind of have this like back and forth conversation. Let's see what it's doing. Okay, it looked like it wasn't doing anything for a sec, but it's like literally coding, like we're vibe coding. All right, let me close this. Okay. I mean, I don't know how long it would have taken me, probably hours to create this on my own, but this is I think it's a correlation chart. So it's correlating the activity. And again, this is dummy data, right? Like there's loads more activity I could have put in here, but I wanted it to go pretty fast. But here's like all of the personas and then the correlation of that activity to what is driving retention. So in dark green, I can see here, segment searches are driving the most retention for account managers and sessions watched for support team, etc. So I'm not going to go through all of this just, in the just because of time here. But you can see it's like giving like all these details about each persona. And it even went on to like recommend an email sequence. So from here, again, I could keep asking it questions. I don't have enough time, I think, to do that. But one thing you could do too is say, hey, like, can you put this into a deck, right? Like once you get all of the output that you want, you could say, put this in a deck, and then that way you can share it with, the executive team or your leadership team, or have it as a reference. You can share this chat by going up here. Or I thought you could, maybe you can't in Gemini, but if in order to share this, you would just need to copy and paste, but you could say, hey, like put this into a Google Slides deck, and it would just generate, a 10 slide deck or something with all of these insights. I'm going to show you like kind of how to turn this into an agent. So one of the things that we want to say is, hey, rewrite these instructions to become a gem, which is Gemini's version of agents. Be a bit more broad with the gem CSV analysis. And I want you to be able to run this for any CSV analysis and be asked questions about the data before an analysis is run. So same concept, we want it to ask, those 5 questions. But rather than just focusing on new user onboarding, we want to do this for like any analysis. What this is going to do is allow us to have that permanent context, right? So then that way I don't have to start a new chat every time and just say, hey, you're a data analyst. Hey, I want you to do this. You can copy and paste the same prompt over and over, but this is skipping all of that. So what I'm going to do is just basically copy this output, go over here and click gems. Then I'm going to click new gem and then paste it in the instructions. And let's just call it CSV analyzer. And this is what I was talking about, like depending on what LLM you have, this is where you can upload that permanent context, right? Your voice and tone guide, your brand guidelines, etc. Let's just save this. Let's start a chat. All right, it pulled in my CSV again, and I'm just going to say, analyze this data. I don't know what's going to happen. This is a live demo. Anything could happen, but hopefully it's going to ask me 5 questions, just like it did in that other chat. All right, it's doing that Python. Okay, it just skipped and it didn't ask me the question. So something you can do is you could actually go in. Oh, it did ask, please clarify the following. So yeah, I would just respond to these questions and then basically have a similar output, hopefully. All right, let's jump back to the deck and wrap up. So next steps. okay, you can create or download a CSV from wherever you get your analytics from and make sure there isn't any data missing. The reason it's a CSV is because it works best if it's not super formatted. Okay, you don't want to like have merged rows or anything like that. Make sure it's simple, there's no data missing. If there's any fields that are null, tell the LLM, hey, like, here's what I want you to do if the field is missing. And then go ahead and use prompt looping to analyze your data. And then you can do what I did and scale it by turning it into an agent and then share it with your team, hopefully blow their socks off. And then connect with me on LinkedIn. That is a QR code that will connect you with me on LinkedIn. And I'm always open to coffee chats. So if anybody's interested in chatting about AI or digital customer success or anything else, go ahead and hit me up. All right. Hisham, hopefully I ended on time okay, but do we have some time for questions?
Yes, we actually do have, I'd say about 5-ish minutes. If you all have any questions for Chrissy, please go ahead and use the Q&A feature within Zoom. You should be able to see it at the bottom. Um, no questions that I see yet, but Mary did say this is awesome, and I really appreciate that there's actions that I can do today. Thank you, Chrissy. And Lisa said this was so good. Thank you so much. Tracy did ask, have you used Claude Cowork and Excel?
Ooh, I have. I recently started using Claude Core just a couple of weeks ago. So, like I said, I think this is something like if I had more time, I probably would have shared that. But I think Claude Cowork is a great tool. Um, the ability to connect MCP to, like your Google Sheets or upload an Excel file right to that, and then asking it questions. I think, in my opinion, Claude is a great thought partner, and yeah, that's been my experience so far. Is it's been really good for stuff like this too.
We do have a few more minutes if you have any other questions for Chrissy. I'll give it a minute to see if anyone else would like to ask her. And if not, then we can go ahead and end the session earlier. Okay. There is a question from Lisa. What if my company doesn't collect person data? Is it at all possible to get personalized with our campaigns? I'm pushing for engineering to collect it, but not at the moment.
Hmm. I think that's tough. I think it depends on your company and what you know about those people. Um, I think if you can't, perhaps a workaround is to interview those folks. Is there a survey you could send out? Is there a way that you could collect data that isn't so direct, so to speak? Maybe there's some indirect ways that you could collect data. Um, is there even like um, something that you could put in the app where there's a screen that pops up and it says, hey, like before you log in for the first time, tell us your name, what your job is, maybe what your goals are. So there's some ways that you can kind of personalize, but unfortunately, without like collecting that exact activity, like you kind of have to get that from your customers. Um, but I don't know. Good luck. Hopefully you can make that happen because I think it's super important nowadays to have that data so that you can personalize your campaigns.
There's another question from Tyra. For those of us building out digital CS motions, what are the top 3 use cases where you found AI adds the most value across the customer lifecycle from onboarding through renewal?
That's a good one. Um, I mean, lately I think Claude Cowork has been great. I think like if I think about how I operate with programs, right? One of the first things I'm doing is I need to analyze data to figure out what programs should we even focus on this quarter. Um, and I think like that is one thing you need to look at is uh, are there any gaps in your communications? So I think you could even use AI to address, hey, like where are our gaps? What should we be focusing on? Perhaps it would be onboarding, maybe it would be later in the life cycle. Um, I think with Claude Cowork, like you can even do things like connect your MCP to Gmail, right? And your whatever wherever you're getting your data about your customers. And you could even like create a button where it has it's got a CSM that can kind of like click this button that says like, hey, here's who I'm talking today from this company. What should we talk about? And it's like analyzing, maybe your Gong data from like past conversations. It's analyzing, um, uh, like who's been using our app at like this company, et cetera, et cetera. Um, so I don't know. I think that's a hard question to answer because there's like so many things that you could do, but essentially just look across like how you operate as a program manager and just like work through that, right? And then on the sort of tail end of each program, right, you need to quantify impact. So you could have it look at like the email data or the in-app data or whatever it is that you're using, whatever channel, and then analyze that and even like A/B test some subject lines. And it could tell you which performed better and what to try next time. So I don't know. I think that's tough because like the sky is the limit, really. But those are just a few things that I've been doing lately.
We have one more question from Michael, and we also have time for one last question if anyone else would like to submit. But great idea doing these loops. Do you have any other ideas to save tokens?
Save tokens. Um, I mean, I think like from what I know, that is like going to be one of the biggest skills that you can have, right? I mean, look at Uber, who just recently like cut their token costs because they basically hit their quota within 4 months of their annual budget. So I do think like if we can figure out how to cut tokens, that's going to be like a huge skill for this year and in the future. One thing that I've kind of heard is if your chat is getting too long, so like iterative chat, yes, it's great, but if you're chatting back and forth, and you've hit like, I don't know, like 15, 20 messages, best thing you could probably do is just say, hey, like, can you summarize this chat? I'm going to start a new window and then go ahead and do that because I think the way that tokens work is it reads like everything you've already talked about, like every single time you're prompting it. So if you get to a point where you have too much, it'll just kind of eat away at that. So that's just one other suggestion you could try.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chrissy. And with that, we are at the end of our session. I apologize. I know there were some issues with Zoom earlier today. So if you did miss any part of the session, please do not worry at all. The recording, the entirety of this recording for the session will be available tomorrow in our resource hub, as well as recordings for all of the sessions. So if there's any others that you missed or won't be able to attend, we will notify you all when they are available. Thank you again, Chrissy, to our wonderful speaker for joining us today. And thank you everyone else for attending.
Bye, everyone. Thank
Bye.
you.